Serve with crisp brown pork sausage or with ham or bacon. Lots of lucky men can have Aunt Jemima buckwheats tomorrow if they only ask for them.
Just add it to cold milk and beat it up. That's all. By the time you're ready to eat it, it's all ready for you. Jell-O Instant Pudding, made by the famous Jell-O folks.
If you were poor in America in the 1960s, your meals wouldn't have included pizza, hamburgers, or overflowing supermarkets like today. Instead, there were shabby corner groceries, where just a few pennies had to stretch to feed an entire family. There were those stiff cans of meat, cheap packets of noodles, and bland government cheese boxes. They didn't sound appealing, but they fed millions of Americans. And those seemingly ordinary items dug deep into memory, becoming the mark of an entire generation that grew up in poverty. So would you dare to look back and see how you might have lived in that era? Let's explore 25 grocery items you could buy in the 1960s if you were poor. And trust me, more than a few names will surprise you. 20. Campbell's Soup, a 10-cent dinner. Thin as water walk into any 1960s grocery, and you'd see neat rows of red and white Campbell's soup cans, practically calling out to struggling families. At just 10 cents a can, it was cheap luxury. No need for fresh meat or produce. Just add water and you had dinner. Working families loved Campbell's not just for the price, but for its convenience. In an era when many mothers juggled jobs and kids. In factory towns, dads often stopped at the store after work, grabbing a few cans and a box of saltines. That watery tomato or chicken noodle soup with crackers was dinner. The can was everywhere, from poor kitchens to suburban pantries. But for the poor, it was survival. Its tangy tomato and salty broth became part of childhood memory. In 1962, Andy Warhol even turned the soup can into immortal pop art. Campbell's is still on shelves, but now seen as industrial food. For those who grew up poor, though, one glance at the red and white can still brings back the memory of a simple America, where even a 10-cent dinner could warm the heart. 19. Bisquick, the miracle pancake mix. If Jell-O turned a poor birthday into a party, Bisquick was the miracle behind a working-class family's Sunday morning. The yellow and blue General Mills box sat neatly on A&P shelves, affordable and reliable. With just an egg and a little carnation powdered milk, Mom could whip up a stack of golden pancakes. The memory is vivid. Mom at the stove, an old cast iron pan sizzling, and the first pancake always burned around the edges. No one ever threw it away. The kids fought over it like a prize. The rest of the pancakes, stacked high on a plate, drizzled with cheap Caro syrup, became the family's version of a fancy breakfast. Bisquick was advertised as a miracle for the busy housewife, promising not just pancakes, but quick biscuits, cakes, even a simple pizza crust. But for poor families, pancakes alone were luxury enough. Today, brunch menus and organic pancake mixes abound, but nothing can replace that old memory. A box of Bisquick, a weekend morning, and children's laughter filling a poor family's kitchen. 18. Kraft macaroni and cheese, one tiny box stretched to feed 7 people. Here's a detail that lays bare just how poor America was in the 60s. Many families split a single box of Kraft macaroni and cheese among 6 or 7 people. That tiny box, costing under 20 cents, contained nothing more than some dry pasta and a packet of bright orange powder. Yet it was a must-have dinner, week after week. In cramped kitchens, mothers boiled macaroni on rickety gas stoves, then tore open the powder packet, pouring out a neon orange dust that smelled sharp and artificial. Mixed with carnation powdered milk and a little cheap margarine, the pot turned into a golden, creamy dish that felt like luxury to kids. a glowing plate of comfort food. For college students of the era, Kraft mac and cheese was a lifesaver. All it took was a hot plate in a dorm, a box of macaroni, and some water to get through a meal. Some even added Spam or sliced hot dogs to make it feel more complete. As food choices expanded, Kraft mac and cheese was mocked as junk food, industrial and bland. But for poor families in the 60s, that neon orange wasn't just cheese powder. It was a memory of warmth, a reminder that even in the hardest days, there was still one dish that made kids feel like they were eating rich. 17. Spam, the survival meat soldiers mocked as ham that didn't pass the exam. There's one sound that captured the memory of America's hard times in the 1950s and 60s, the sharp pop of a Spam can being opened. Created in 1937 by Hormel, Spam was originally just a way to use up surplus pork shoulder. But World War II turned it into a legend. More than 150 million pounds of Spam were shipped to the front lines, so much that U.S. soldiers gave it a nickname that was both funny and bitter: ham that didn't pass the exam. After the war, that habit came home with the troops, and Spam quickly found its place in millions of American kitchens. In the 1950s and 60s, a can of Spam cost about 39 to 45 cents. It was cheap, convenient, required no refrigeration, and could last for months. In American memory, Spam showed up everywhere. Fried crisp for breakfast, with eggs and Wonder Bread, diced into salad or fried rice, or tucked into a sandwich to take to the job site. Many kids still recall winter mornings when the smell of sizzling Spam filled the kitchen, a sure sign that today's breakfast was fancy. The funny thing is, Spam was never good in a gourmet sense. It was salty, chewy, a bit mealy, but filling and familiar. That practicality made it part of American culture. Every working-class pantry had a few cans stashed away for emergencies. Today, Spam still sits on store shelves, but it carries a different meaning: nostalgia mixed with satire. For the Eisenhower generation, one whiff of that tinny pink meat can bring back the memory of a poorer but resilient America when a single can could feed a family. 16. Wonder Bread, the bread you could roll into a ball picture yourself in a small-town grocery in 1965. Wooden shelves stacked with long loaves in clear plastic, dotted with bright red, yellow, and blue circles. For just 18 cents, you could bring home a loaf of Wonder Bread. So white, it looked more like it came from a lab than an oven. Advertised as the bread that built strong bodies, Wonder Bread was enriched with vitamins and minerals starting in 1941. But poor families didn't care about vitamins. They cared that it was cheap and soft enough to roll into a ball. The memory is vivid. A rushed morning, Mom spreading peanut butter and grape jelly on 2 slices, folding them into a sandwich for school. A worker's lunch in a brown paper bag, Wonder Bread, and a slice of bologna. To kids, it tasted bland, but it meant they had food. Wonder Bread is still around, but often criticized as empty and industrial. For those who grew up poor, though, that soft, fluffy loaf is remembered as survival food, proof that even bland white bread could feel like a miracle. 15. Hot dogs, the poor man's steak. In American grocery stores of the 1960s, inside the frosty cold cases, stacks of 10-packs of hot dogs waited for poor families to take them home. Costing only 45 to 50 cents, even a father, with just a few coins left after payday, could afford them. With nothing more than a pot of boiling water or an old cast-iron skillet, hot dogs became a hot, filling dinner. The memory lives on in the sizzle of sausages, splitting open in the pan, the salty aroma filling the cramped kitchen. Kids clutched cheap white rolls, waiting for Mom to tuck in a steaming hot dog, topped with a smear of mustard. To them, it wasn't just food. It was a rare moment of joy in a poor childhood. Back then, people often said, with a mix of humor and truth, "The rich eat steak, the poor live on hot dogs." As humble as they were, hot dogs brought people together. In backyards, families gathered around glowing charcoal grills, kids laughing with mustard-stained smiles, while adults forgot their worries for a little while. A cheap package from the grocery store turned into a meal full of warmth. Today, hot dogs fill supermarkets and stadium stands, but they've lost the sacred role of being a true dinner. For those who lived through the 60s, one glance at a pack can flood back memories of poverty and the feeling that a small hot dog could still taste like a feast. 14. Peanut butter, parents' secret weapon. In many poor families of the 1960s, a jar of peanut butter always sat on the kitchen shelf. Jif, Skippy, or Peter Pan. The brands filled entire aisles at A&P and Safeway. At 35 to 40 cents a jar, it was the secret weapon parents used to feed kids all week. The memory is clear. Thin slices of Wonder Bread, spread thick with sticky peanut butter and grape jelly, packed into brown paper lunch bags. At school, kids opened their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches among friends. The peanut butter clung to their mouths, but it filled their stomachs until evening. Adults knew peanut butter wasn't just food. It was the cheapest protein to raise a generation. That's why, no matter how tired of it they were, it showed up at every meal. Peanut butter still lines Walmart shelves today, now in organic, crunchy, and creamy versions. But for those who grew up poor, just opening a jar and smelling that nutty scent brings back memories of sticky sandwiches. Simple, humble, but full of love. 13. Jell-O, America's cheapest dessert. Now picture a poor kid's birthday party in suburban America, 1965. No frosted cake, no fancy gifts, just a wobbly wooden table, a few folding chairs, and bowls of brightly colored Jell-O, sparkling under dim yellow light. That was enough to make kids cheer. For just a few cents at Woolworth or A&P, families bought packets of Jell-O powder. Stir it into boiling water, chill it overnight, and by morning, dessert was ready. It wasn't just food, it was cheap joy, a way for poor kids to feel like they had a real birthday. Jell-O was also a national dish in schools and hospitals, cheap and easy to eat. For many, Jell-O memories are tied to both childhood parties and sick days, when a trembling red bowl felt like comfort. 12. Potatoes, the cheapest sack in America. One of the most recognizable images in a poor family's shopping cart during the 1960s was a 5 or 10-pound sack of potatoes in the corner of the store. They cost only a few dimes, cheap enough for everyone. And most importantly, they could be transformed into countless meals that stretched across the week. You might remember those sacks rolling around the kitchen floor, the potatoes uneven in size, still streaked with dry dirt. Kids were given the task of peeling them carefully, while Mom busied herself with a can of Crisco or a dented pot. Tonight, it might be mashed potatoes with cheap margarine. Tomorrow, golden fries. The next day, a stew with ground meat. That humble sack of potatoes carried families through 7 days, like a simple miracle of the poor. What made potatoes special wasn't just the low cost, but their power to connect people. In drafty kitchens where beef was too expensive and roast chicken appeared only on holidays, potatoes quietly stood in. People joked that potatoes were the food that could change costumes. Whether boiled, mashed, fried, or baked, It was still the same potato, but it felt fresh and new at every meal. Today, potatoes are just another supermarket staple, rarely thought of as life-saving. But for poor families of the 60s, one glance at a sack on a store shelf brings back the memory of a time when a cheap bag of spuds could carry an entire household through the winter. 11. Saltine crackers, the survival cracker found in hospitals. In this list, no food is tied to American poverty more than a box of Nabisco saltine crackers. On the shelves of Woolworth or A&P, just a few cents bought you a box of thin square crackers, so bland they were nearly tasteless. Yet they fed struggling families all through the 1960s. Back then, watery Campbell's soup with a handful of crumbled saltines was enough to turn a poor meal into something that felt filling. Kids clearly remember breaking the crackers into tiny pieces, dropping them into soup until they softened enough to swallow. Dry and flavorless, they were never praised as delicious, but they left an unforgettable mark. Saltines also became known as hospital crackers and school crackers, appearing on free lunch trays for poor students or on the meal trays of patients. That fragile, brittle cracker became an unofficial symbol of poverty, plain, repetitive, but impossible to live without. Today, saltines are still on the shelves, but now only as a low-calorie snack. For the 1960s generation, they remain an unforgettable memory, proof that sometimes survival could be held in nothing more than a dry, bland cracker. 10-minute rice, dry rice in 5 minutes. Some nights in the 1960s, parents came home late, kids were starving, and minute rice saved the day. A cheap box from Safeway or Kroger promised rice in a flash. In just 5 minutes, the family had hot rice to pour Campbell's soup over or to eat with beans. The grains were dry, never fluffy, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that bellies were full, gas was saved, and life went on. By 1962, minute rice was one of America's top convenience foods, modern in advertising but most common in poor kitchens. 9. Kool-Aid, the fake soda. That poor kids relied on just 5 cents in the 1960s could buy a little Kool-Aid packet that turned into an entire gallon of brightly colored soda. For poor families, it was nothing short of magic. Add sugar and water in a plastic pitcher, and suddenly the kids had their own soda party. That scene lives on in memory. Mom pours in red or green powder, stirs with a wooden spoon, the sugar rattling as it dissolves, and in seconds, plain water becomes a sweet, tangy, fireworks-colored drink. Kids cheered as cheap plastic cups filled with the magic juice, then dashed to the backyard, laughing with red lips and stained t-shirts. Kool-Aid even had its own mascot, the Kool-Aid Man, a giant pitcher smashing through walls yelling, "Oh yeah!" Kids from poor households may not have had chilled Coca-Cola or Pepsi, but with Kool-Aid, they had their own summer party. 8. Government cheese, a brick-hard block of cheese that even stuck to the knife. For anyone who grew up in America from the late 1960s through the 1980s, there's no forgetting the sight of a brown cardboard box stamped U.S. Department of Agriculture sitting on the porch. Inside was not a gift, but a 5-pound block of what an entire generation called government cheese. It came from a federal food program that bought up surplus milk and turned it into processed cheese, then handed it out to families on food stamps. For a household scraping by on an average income of just $6,900 in 1965, that free block of cheese was a lifesaver. It was neon orange, brick hard, sticky on the knife, and when melted clumped instead of smoothing out like Kraft's TV ads. It smelled sharp, salty, and greasy, but it turned potatoes into casseroles and Wonder Bread into grilled cheese sandwiches. For many poor kids, it was school lunch, the taste of poverty, but also proof they wouldn't go to bed hungry. Today, government cheese is gone from shelves, surviving only in memory, in rap lyrics, and in memoirs. For those who lived it, it wasn't just food. It was a symbol of a poor America, where hope came wrapped in a heavy orange block that meant survival. 7. Pinto beans, a pot of pennies that lasted all week. In an American grocery store 60 years ago, there was one familiar corner every poor family visited. Stacks of burlap sacks filled with pinto beans, sold dirt cheap, just a few cents a pound. Those little speckled beans weren't flashy, didn't look as tempting as canned meat or colorful cereals. But they were the protein of the poor, a food that could stretch across a whole week for the lowest cost. A single pound of pinto beans, once simmered, could feed an entire large family for a full day, something no other cheap food could match. That's why pinto beans became a grocery staple, trusted by the poor as their ticket through hunger. Anyone who lived through that time remembers Mom soaking beans the night before, then setting them to simmer all day in dented aluminum pots on shaky gas stoves. The thick steam carried a nutty, earthy scent through the small house. By evening, the family gathered around the table, ladling soft beans into bowls, served with golden cornbread or plain white bread. It was a simple meal, never fancy, but always warm and comforting. Pinto beans have endured over time, even becoming a key ingredient in Tex-Mex cooking. Yet few still recall the sight of a bubbling pot of beans that simmered from morning till night, or the relief of knowing that just a few coins at the corner store could guarantee your family wouldn't go to bed hungry. 6. Crisco shortening, a can of fat. Instead of real butter for decades, Crisco shortening quietly filled poor American kitchens. The blue and white tin, 3 pounds heavy, sold for 29 to 35 cents in 1965 and was a familiar sight at A&P and Kroger. For families who couldn't afford butter, Crisco was the stand-in. Mothers used it to fry chicken, bake pies, make pie crusts, or even stir a spoonful into mashed potatoes to make them look richer. The flavor was heavy and never as good as real butter, but it stretched poor dinners into something fuller and warmer. No one forgets the moment of prying open the tin with a pop, the greasy smell filling the kitchen, the thick white fat inside that could last for months without refrigeration, a lifesaver for families without a fridge. Crisco wasn't just cooking fat. It was a symbol of making do in hard times. It represented how ordinary Americans stretched every dollar to feed their families, even if the flavor wasn't perfect. Today, Crisco still sits on supermarket shelves, but no one sees it as a survival tool anymore. For the 60s generation, one look at the tin brings back memories of cramped kitchens, hot frying pans, and hope wrapped in grease. 5. No frills cereal, the silent symbol of poverty. When people think of 1960s American breakfasts, they remember cereal. But poor families didn't pour Tony the Tiger's Frosted Flakes or bright yellow Cheerios. Instead, their shelves held plain white boxes stamped in black. Cornflakes or oats. No colors, no mascots, no toys. Just cheap. About 19 cents a box, nearly half the price of the big brands. Kids sat at the table with bowls of dry flakes, diluted carnation milk poured over them. Bland and boring, they watched classmates at school with colorful Kellogg's boxes, swallowing their envy along with their plain cereal. That contrast, fun cereal on TV versus lifeless white boxes at home, haunted a generation. Over time, no frills cereal vanished, replaced by hundreds of flashy brands. But for those who lived through it, just closing their eyes brings back the white box with black letters, the quiet symbol of poverty, when eating enough mattered more than joy. 4. Quaker Oats, the giant canister that lasted all week. Do you remember winter mornings in small drafty houses when steam rose from an old pot of oatmeal on the gas stove? For poor families in the 1960s, breakfast was Quaker Oats, the giant cardboard cylinder with the smiling Quaker man. A few scoops with water or carnation powdered milk made a thick bowl of oatmeal. If you were lucky, Mom sprinkled in some brown sugar or a handful of raisins. Kids wrinkled their noses, but ate anyway, because it was the only thing keeping them warm before stepping into the cold. Costing only 39 to 49 cents for a huge container, it lasted all week. That's why nearly every poor household kept one on the shelf. Today, Quaker Oats still sells, but it no longer carries the weight of survival. For those who remember, that familiar smiling face brings back mornings of simple food and quiet strength. 3. Lay's potato chips, a nickel's worth of heaven. In the 1960s, the sound of a crinkling Lay's potato chips bag was enough to make poor children's hearts race. At just 5 cents a small bag, it could turn an ordinary day into a celebration. Not every kid got them often. Usually only on payday or during special occasions did that golden bag appear on the kitchen table. Children eagerly passed it around, the smell of salty fried potatoes filling the room. The crisp, crunchy sound in their mouths was pure luxury, for kids used to cold beans or paper-thin bologna sandwiches. Few realized that Lay's was one of the first snack brands sold nationwide, meaning whether you lived in Ohio, Texas, or California, the taste was exactly the same. For poor kids, that meant a feeling of connection, as if the whole country was sharing the same crunchy treat. The 1960s generation will never forget holding that tiny bag of Lay's as if it were treasure, because to them, it was. 2. Carnation powdered milk, the poor child's drink. Not every American child in the 1960s drank fresh milk. In working-class neighborhoods and rural towns, kids grew up on red and white cans of carnation powdered milk, bought cheap at A&P or Safeway. A few coins bought a can that turned into a cloudy, metallic-tasting drink, the only affordable way to add nutrition to a family's diet. The memory lingers. Every morning, Mom spooned powder into a glass, added tap water, and stirred quickly. Children grimaced at the foamy clumps floating on top, with a chalky residue always clinging to the bottom. No one really liked it, but everyone drank it. It was the bittersweet taste of a poor childhood. Ironically, on TV, Carnation promised comfort with the slogan, "From contented cows." But in many poor homes, that can of powdered milk meant not happiness, but hard times. Carnation survives today, mostly as evaporated or cooking milk, but the image of that cheap powder that raised generations of poor American kids has faded into memory, bitter yet unforgettable. 1. Dannon yogurt, a rare treat for the kids. If cornbread was the comfort food of the South, Dannon yogurt felt like something from another world. In the 1960s, yogurt was still new to ordinary Americans, even seen as a strange European product. So when a poor mother brought home a tiny chilled cup of Dannon, it wasn't just food. It was a rare act of love, a small indulgence for the children. The memory sticks. The first spoonful of yogurt, tart and tangy, nothing like Kool-Aid or Jell-O. Kids might frown at the sourness, but they ate it anyway because parents said it was healthy. In poor households, that little cup stood as a symbol of everyday luxury, Rare, but meaningful. Now supermarket aisles burst with endless yogurt brands and flavors. Yet for the 60s generation, the sight of Dannon's blue letters on a white cup still recalls a time when yogurt was an unexpected treasure in a poor family's life. And so, we've gone back to 1960s America, to a time when Spam, Kraft dinners, and Kool-Aid didn't just fill hungry stomachs, but built the memories of an entire generation. And what about you? Which food takes you back to your childhood, to your family? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe to keep opening more doors to America's past.